Hello, welcome to the Rangers News YouTube channel. My name's James Black and I'm joined once again by Jordan Carlisle.
Hello.
How are you doing? So I want to talk to you today, Jordan, about the academy and the kind of blockage in getting boys to come through from the academy side into the first team following on. We've just seen Ross McCrorie head off to join Aberdeen on a season-long loan deal before he makes it permanent next summer for, I think it's 350,000. And there seems to be a lot of boys have kind of found themselves in that similar situation over the last few years, which, given some of the comments coming from the management team at Ibrox, they're quite confusing to me. And it feels as though these kids, whilst they're maybe getting talked up, are they getting the chance to actually show what they can do at Ibrox just now?
Yeah, I think sort of with us, following the club closely over a period of years, there's definitely a pattern that emerges. I think Josh McPeak is probably the first example that comes to mind, because last year it was, this guy is the next great thing from the academy. There's different clubs, various clubs vying to get him. Rangers held on to him. I think he signed a new contract. And then he made his debut against St Joseph's off the bench, 17. Everyone's like, wow, this is brilliant. And then he was farmed off to Dundee on loan, which was a big ask. And I think it was one of the more ambitious loan moves that we've sort of seen from the club recently, due to his age. But he barely played and didn't score and came back. And now he's absolutely nowhere near it. And, hopefully he can turn it round. But, there's the theme with the guys that get a little bit older. They're in that mould and get a bit older, so your Ruddens and your Hardys and those sorts of players, and now someone a bit more high profile in Ross McCrorie, because I think critics of the academy would say that no one's actually getting through to the first team, and the one person that you could really say who had a good run at it was McCrorie, because I think he played 30 games 2 seasons ago. Gerrard, as you say, comments from the club. Gerrard comes out and says he's the future captain, or potential future captain, and all that, and then it just seems to sort of disappear. There's not much leeway for young guys who are obviously going to take a while to settle sometimes, or find their best position as it comes from McCrorie, and that's definitely held him back. But I think my sort of point on this before is that Rangers are under so much pressure at the minute to deliver in terms of trophies, that I think sometimes it's difficult to experiment, difficult to bring players in. But at the same stage, they've obviously invested a lot of money into that academy over a period of time, and you've guys coming through who clearly have ability. They're now out in the rear, but Rangers are bringing in guys in free transfers from other Scottish Premiership clubs, and guys who are just going to really only ever be background figures at the club. And that's sort of what we've seen with, Greg Stewart. Maybe Jordan Jones is now in that mould, but maybe some thought at the time that as an international he could come in and make a mark.
Jake Hastie's another one, came in, one of the most pointless transfers I've seen for a long, long time.
Well, he's coming in off the back of, I think he scored 7 goals for Motherwell, and Rangers are like, oh, we need to sign him. And then if you're a young guy in the academy, if you're a Kai Kennedy, who's coming through at that point, that's maybe before his sort of breakout season as an attacker for the Colts team. But you look at that and think that not only are there Daniel Candeas in the squad ahead of me at this point, established players on good wages, but then they're also looking at other talent elsewhere and bringing that in, just buying it up as soon as possible. So I do think there's a blockage at the minute, and I think people are now getting to the point that it's becoming very frustrating for a lot of supporters who are seeing these sort of wishy-washy transfer deals as such. The amount of money that's pouring into the chart or to the academy, I think a lot of that comes from the pools and all that, and they raise money through that sort of separately. It's not as if they're funneling season ticket funds into it constantly, but I think it's a source of frustration for people.
I mean, one that really jumps out to me was Glenn Middleton. And people are going to think I've kind of got a bit of a hard-on for Ryan Kent abuse here, but it's not. But when you look at both players' first season at Ibrox, Kent and Middleton, they put up near identical numbers. I think Middleton actually put up better numbers than Kent. So the following summer we spent £7 million on one and bombed the other one out on loan. So I mean,
also bringing in Murphy, Jones, Stewart all in the same window.
And it's something you kind of look at these guys and you wonder, what is it they have to do to actually get this proper chance in the first team? Because, as I said, Middleton's first season, I think he performed okay. He wasn't the best player in the squad by any stretch, but I don't think he was massively outperformed by MD in similar positions. But after that, just nothing to be seen. He's gone. He's been bombed out to Hibs and then Bradford. And by all means, yeah, he's not been fantastic on loan, which is to be expected for young kids. Again, you look at Ryan Kent's stint at Bristol City. You know, young players will go out on loan, and they're not always going to go out and hit the ground running and have brilliant spells. The same goes for Ross McCrorie at Portsmouth. Or you can go through the squad. You can go out the squad with guys who've been out on loan. You can go back as far back as Alan McGregor, going to Dunfermline and the likes. Decent enough, never ripped up any trees. He was never a world beater by any stretch of the imagination. But one way or the other, they kind of just get bombed out in favour of these external guys. And as you said, you've had Josh McPake. You've even had other guys who've kind of had a handful of games. Jordan Houston was one. Came in, Gerrard raved about him for a couple of games, vanished. Lewis Mayo came in. He was the next big thing, and he's still kind of on the fringes of the squad. But when you see Niko Katic go down with an injury, the first thing is we'll buy somebody else and we push Lewis further down the pecking order. It must be really frustrating for these boys who are doing brilliantly in the academy setups. I mean, I don't think anybody can argue that they're going away to competition like the Alcas Cup and the Development League and all these other Youth League and punching above their weight, a lot of them. But then when it comes to getting first team football, there just seems to be some problem getting them to take that final step up. And even when they are kind of getting that little sniff, it's almost as if they need to be head and shoulders above established senior players to get a second look. And that to me, it's bizarre. Well, one of the arguments that I've seen made is that the financial turmoil previously, that the academy's only been getting properly funded for maybe the last 5 or 6 years, which is a great cop-out. It doesn't account for Gerrard saying things like Ross McCrorie is a future captain of Rangers. It doesn't account for Josh McPake being the best thing since sliced bread and then vanishing. These guys were part of that 5-year window and have been on the cusp of the first team. And once they get there, they're either not good enough or they're just discarded like the manager's found a new shiny toy to play with. And, you know, you can see why young guys, you can see why Ross McCrorie's went to Gerrard and says, I'd rather leave now.
Yeah, I think I wrongly mentioned Murphy earlier on as someone coming in during this period, but like it was obviously a lot before that when he came in. But I think he almost shows as well when you're saying about how it's tough to perform on loan for these younger players. But also, if you look at Murphy last year, so he's an established player. He's played in England. He's a Scotland international. He goes away and scored 8 goals in 10 games or something, and comes back and he doesn't get a look. So if you're an established player who's proven it before, proved it for 6 months whilst on loan at Rangers, he still doesn't get a chance when he comes back. What hope do the other guys have when you go on loan? At the minute, a loan is just, to me, a precursor to someone being on the being transfer listed, essentially. Unless you're really young, you know, and it's obvious that. But that's the thing. I think there's no one who you would say it's obvious that they're going to break through. I think for Mayo, it must be very disheartening for him. I think he's very highly thought of at the club and has been about for a while. In terms of the junior levels, he's very highly thought of. Went to Partick Thistle last year, didn't get much of a go. I think he had a bit of an injury at the start and then COVID and all that. So that was an issue for him. But yeah, there's no way that, they signed Balogun on a 2-year deal. Kadic's long-term contract. Goldson's the rock in the middle of it. Hollander's 3 or 4 year deal. and he's only a year into it, there's not going to be any room for him to break through, and it's just so like you can just see it panning out that it's not going to happen. It'll take something massive, and as you said about potential future captain and all that, Gerrard has consistently said if they're good enough they'll play, but that obviously leaves stuff up to his discretion, so he's just considering everyone not good enough. But maybe in certain cases that is true. You're not going to have a guy who's straight out of Colts League or the Rangers team that won the Reserves League 2 years ago, and you're playing teams and just tanking people every week. It's not really a proper game. You're not going to have someone coming out of that and then starting on the right wing in the Europa League group stage. That's also unrealistic. I think fans need to be realistic about it. But I think that the carrot is dangled so many times with guys that come through and be like, oh, this is a Rangers fan who's come up through the ranks and he's going to play for Rangers and he's going to be a hero. But there's just no sign of that actually happening. And you have your Kennedys, who was brilliant last year, and I think sort of Gerrard had probably a go at him for his attitude, so maybe he shot himself in the foot a little bit. But the amount of attacking options Rangers now have with spending money on Hadji, Kent, Roof, Itten, all in the space of basically a window and a half or whatever, it's there's simply no way he's going to get game time. So it must be quite disheartening. I think there's probably a balance to it. Maybe there is more needs to be done, maybe better games, which is obviously one thing that they've been pushing, trying to push cult leagues, trying to push proper friendlies against proper European teams to really test the guys. So maybe there'll be a while before the effect of that sort of trickles down to make those squads better, the games better, and people more ready. But certainly there does seem to be a reluctance to use people, and I think he had a guy in McCrorie who had proven that he could operate, certainly in midfield, and many people sort of now think that when he went down to England, right back is a better position for him. But yeah, you can see that you get to a certain point in your career and you want to play, and you can see how he didn't think that was going to happen, which is a shame.